The Psychology of Deals, How to Get What You Want. Published by Veridian. Chapter 1. You have probably felt it. The sharp tug of wanting something. A raise, a forgiven debt, a committed partner, a better deal on a car, the sale of a lifetime, and the gnawing uncertainty about how to actually get it. The tug often becomes louder when stakes are real. A job you need to keep, a relationship that matters, a deadline that will change everything. This book is about the practical psychology behind those moments, the invisible currents that move people from maybe to yes, and how you can steer them without tricks, coercion, or manipulation. You'll learn how deals are made in the real world, quietly, humanly, and often on the back of small, consistent choices. First, let's dispose of myth. Many people picture negotiation and getting what you want as a gladiatorial sport, a loud contest where only the boldest, blusteriest person wins. That myth sells drama because drama is entertaining. But it's wrong. Real deals are rarely won by volume. They are won by clarity, preparation, empathy, timing, and, most importantly, by understanding how the other person sees the world. Put bluntly, if you know what the other person needs and you can credibly help them get it while also serving your interest, you win. If you try to win by force, you often lose what matters most: trust and future opportunity. The psychology of deals is built on 3 simple truths. 1. Humans are predictably irrational. We don't always act in our long-term best interest, but our choices are guided by patterns: fairness, reciprocity, loss aversion, social proof, and a desire to belong. 2. Perception is reality. If the other person believes a proposal is fair, feasible, and aligned with their identity, they will accept it. If they believe it threatens their identity, status, or autonomy, they will reject it, even if the numbers are in their favor. 3. Emotions come first. Reason follows. Your job, then, is not to overpower emotion, but to work with it. Reduce fear, increase perceived value, and make the path to yes feel safe and sensible. Imagine you're buying a used car. The car itself is a bundle of facts: miles, service records, dents, and engine life. But the sale hinges on stories. The seller's story: why they love the car, why they must sell now, what kind of owner they were. The buyer's story: how the car will be used, their worries about future costs, the memory of a past bad purchase. A smart buyer listens to the seller's story, addresses fears with evidence, service records, recent repairs, and tells a new story that connects the car to the seller's values. It'll go to a family who will care for it. The price then becomes less about numbers and more about a shared narrative that both parties prefer over continued negotiation. That narrative finesse, the quiet softening of barriers, is at the heart of the psychology we'll explore. Practical skill number 1. Prepare your best alternative. Psychologists call it BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's not glamorous, but it's powerful. Know your fallback so you don't bargain from desperation. People who don't know their alternatives make concessions they later regret because they fear loss more than they value gain. If you know what you'll do when a deal fails, you approach the table calm and confident, and calmness is persuasive. Practical skill number 2. Listen like your outcome depends on it, because it does. Listening is not silence punctuated by nods. It is asking the right questions, reflecting feelings back, and letting people explain their priorities. When someone feels heard, they release psychological resistance and become more willing to accept solutions. You will practice ways to listen that reveal underlying motivations rather than surface positions. People often state what they think is negotiable. Beneath that is what they truly care about. Your job is to discover that subterranean desire. Practical skill number 3. Frame the offer. Humans understand new information by placing it into familiar categories. The same salary figure can feel low or generous depending on context. Framing techniques, anchoring with a higher number, comparing to average outcomes, or showing a timeline of benefits, change perception without changing facts. The ethical use of framing is not about deceit. It's about presenting information so decisions are made on relevant comparisons rather than gut panic. But knowledge alone won't do. You need credibility. Credibility is earned through consistency, expertise, and trust signals. Stories of past success, references, transparent data. When you show competence and goodwill, your proposals are seen as less risky. People trade risk for value. Reduce perceived risk, and you increase perceived value. There is a moral question at the center of this work. When does persuasion become manipulation? The line is drawn by intent and outcome. If your intent is to help both parties achieve meaningful gains and you're honest about costs, you're persuading. If you hide information, exploit vulnerabilities, or aim to leave the other party worse off, you're manipulating. This book assumes you want sustainable influence, deals that leave doors open and reputations intact. The most enduring advantage is reputation, and reputations are fragile. Throughout this book, you will meet short case studies, conversations that tip into agreement, meetings that stall and then restart, apologies that reclaim trust, and scripts that fail because they ignore the human element. You will get frameworks that map decisions into practical steps, checklists that fit in your pocket, and language patterns that reduce friction. You'll also learn when silence beats speech, when to walk away, and how to use concessions without paying more than you must. Finally, a promise and a small secret. By the final chapter, one will give you a single, deceptively simple principle that ties everything together. A principle many masters use, but rarely name. It is not a trick or a script. It is an orientation. It changes how you approach people, not by teaching you to dominate, but by teaching you to see the opportunity in the other person's perspective first. If you practice it, deals will stop feeling like battles and start feeling like shared problem solving. For now, start where deals always start, with clarity about what you want and why. Write it down. Be specific. Know your minimum acceptable outcome and your ideal outcome. Know what you can offer that the other person values. Think about timing. Sometimes patience is leverage. Sometimes urgency is the best currency. Consider your relationship with the other party. Is it one-off or ongoing? The answers to these questions will shape every sentence you say at the negotiating table. This introduction is not a blueprint. It's a map. The rest of the book will walk you through terrain. How to build rapport that lasts beyond the table. How to structure offers people say yes to. How to negotiate powerfully without burning bridges. And how to recover when deals go wrong. You will practice small experiments that change your approach in measurable ways. One phrase to try in a salary discussion, one question to ask when a client hesitates, one way to frame a discount so it feels like a favor rather than a loss. If you're skeptical, that's good. Healthy skepticism keeps you honest and grounded. If you're hungry, that's even better. Hunger fuels the trial and error that turns theory into craft. Read the next chapter when you're ready to stop imagining the perfect outcome and start designing it, step by deliberate step. Chapter 2. Preparation is boring until it saves you from embarrassment, regret, or a deal that leaves you poor in ways that money can't measure. Most people treat negotiation like improvisation, winging a few lines, hoping the other side will stumble. That approach works as often as a coin flip. The other, rarer approach is deliberate. You arrive with a plan, with knowledge about your own limits, and with a clear sense of what you'll do if the conversation ends without agreement. That knowledge changes everything because it changes your mental posture from anxious to agentic. In short, preparation is your emotional armor. Start with purpose. Ask yourself, plainly, what do I want and why do I want it? The question sounds trivial, but most people answer with vague wishes. I want more money. I want the client to sign, instead of specific outcomes. Translate desire into measurable terms. More money becomes a salary target, a number, a range, and the benefits you care about. The client's signature becomes a timeline and deliverables. When your objectives are crisp, you can test proposals against them and avoid being seduced by glitter, nice-sounding concessions that, in the cold light of day, don't move you toward your goal. Next, think in 3 variables: outcomes you want, outcomes you can live within, outcomes you will not accept. Give them names: ideal, minimum, and deal breaker. The ideal is your aspiration. The minimum is the boundary that preserves your dignity, finances, or future. The deal breaker is a red line that requires walking away. Being honest about these limits is hard because it requires confronting fear. Fear of losing, fear of appearing unreasonable, fear of scarcity. But fear is what drives poor concessions. You will save yourself from those errors by deciding ahead of time what you will accept and what you won't. Your fallback, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or BATNA, is your psychological game changer. It's not dramatic. It's practical. If you're asking for a raise, your BATNA might be searching part-time for other roles, taking a freelance client, or tightening your budget for 3 months and readdressing the issue later. If you're a freelancer negotiating contract terms, your BATNA might be a pipeline of prospective clients you can reach out to if this one falls through. The stronger and more concrete your BATNA, the less likely you are to trade away value out of panic. Even a weak BATNA helps because it forces you to think in options rather than in scarcity. Work on your BATNA before you sit down. Small actions: sending one exploratory email, crunching numbers on your finances, or identifying 2 alternative suppliers. Convert hypothetical fallback into credible options. The act of preparing a BATNA also reveals leverage. Sometimes your best alternative is not no deal. It's a different timing, a restructured offer, or a shift in scope. When you can say privately, if we can't agree now, I'll do X and revisit in 3 months, you're signaling restraint rather than desperation. People sense it. Calmness invites respect. Preparation also means mapping the other side. Don't treat the other person as an obstacle. Treat them as a system with wants, pressures, and constraints. Ask, what do they want? What pressures are they under? Who influences them? How do they measure success? The better you can answer these, the more precisely you can craft proposals that fit their incentives. In many negotiations, the true bargaining chips aren't price or time, but things like convenience, reputation, or the reduction of risk. If you can trade what you're willing to give for what they secretly need, you win without a spectacle. Collect facts, yes, but collect stories too. People are moved by narrative more than by spreadsheets. If you're preparing to ask for a partnership, gather testimonials, examples of past results, and short stories that show how you solve problems. If you want a change in your job, prepare a brief portfolio of achievements tied to outcomes: revenue gained, processes improved, headaches you removed. Stories transform abstract capabilities into relatable proof. They help the other person imagine the future with you in it. Anticipate objections, not to be trapped by them, but to neutralize them. List the 3 objections you expect and draft clear, neutral responses. Objections are not attacks. They are data. When you encounter them, listen first, then respond with empathy and evidence. Demonstrating that you anticipated concerns signals competence and reduces the need for posturing. It also gives you a rhythm in the conversation, a pattern of acknowledge, clarify, propose. That rhythm feels professional and lowers emotional temperature. Practice the opening lines. Most negotiations wobble in the first 2 minutes because people haven't settled their tone. Decide how you will open: a friendly fact, a concise purpose statement, or a question. For example, I wanted to meet because I have a proposal that could save the company money while improving service. I'd like to talk through it and get your view. Short, non-demanding, and respectful. Your opening sets the frame: cooperative or adversarial. Choose cooperative unless you have a hard reason not to. Plan concessions strategically. Concessions cost you something. Treat them like currency. Decide what you're willing to give, in what order, and what you expect in return. A common mistake is to make unilateral concessions early to build goodwill. That feels generous but weakens your position and trains others to grab. Instead, make conditional concessions. I can do X if you can do Y. Conditional giving keeps the exchange balanced and signals that deals require reciprocity. Mind your nonverbal armor. Preparation includes one underrated detail: how you will manage your presence. Simple things matter. Arrive on time. Have notes organized. Offer a drink if in person. Maintain eye contact without staring, and keep your posture open. These are not tricks to manipulate. They are social cues that humans use to assess reliability and warmth. Your body language can either reinforce your verbal clarity or contradict it. If you say you're calm but your hands are trembling, people notice more than you think. Plan for the unexpected. Not everything will go according to script. Maybe the other person brings a surprise decision maker. Maybe a competitor has already offered a lower price. Or maybe new constraints arrive. Good negotiators prepare fallback scripts for surprises. A calm request for time. I need 24 hours to consider that. A pivot to another asset you can offer, or a transparent admission that you need to rethink. This kind of flexibility, prepared adaptability, is rare and persuasive. Finally, rehearse. Talk the scenario out loud with a friend, record yourself, or write a one-page script you can casually read before the meeting. Rehearsal is not about creating a robotic performance. It's about mentally encoding options so you don't panic when emotions rise. When pressure hits, practice phrases and pre-thought responses act like scaffolding. They keep you from collapsing into habitual, self-sabotaging behavior. When you walk into a negotiation with clarity about your goals, a credible BATNA, a mapped understanding of the other side, planned concessions, and a few rehearsed lines, you change the dynamic immediately. You stop reacting and start directing. People respond to competence. They may still push back, but you will push back with strategy instead of panic. Preparation does not guarantee success. It guarantees that you will make better choices on purpose. And in the long run, that is what turns occasional wins into a pattern of reliable success. Chapter 3. People make decisions about you before you open your mouth. That truth is both unfair and useful. Unfair because first impressions are messy and often driven by accidental signals. Useful because first impressions are predictable and therefore influenceable. This chapter is about building rapport, not the cheesy small talk people imagine, but the deep, practical kind of rapport that lowers defenses, speeds agreement, and preserves dignity on both sides. Rapport isn't charm school. It's a set of habits that make other people feel seen, safe, and understood. When someone experiences that, they stop fighting to be heard and start listening to your ideas. Start with presence. Presence is the simplest, most underrated rapport builder, and it costs nothing. Being present means you aren't checking your phone, glancing at the clock, or mentally composing your rebuttal while someone is talking. It means you orient your body toward the speaker, match their speaking pace subtly, and let silence happen without panic. Presence communicates respect. Respect begets trust. Trust unlocks conversation. Practically, presence looks like this. You listen until the other person finishes a thought. You paraphrase what they said to show you heard it. And you ask a single clarifying question that proves you were tracking. If you want a quick test, after someone speaks, wait 1 second before responding. That single beat changes the quality of the interaction. Mirroring is the simplest pattern people notice without noticing. If someone leans forward, you lean forward. If they lower their voice, you lower yours. If they use 3-word sentences, you use concise sentences too. Mirroring signals similarity, and similarity signals safety. But beware of mimicry that feels robotic. The goal is not to copy the other person's every movement. It is to match rhythm and energy so that the conversation feels synchronized. When done subtly, mirroring reduces friction. When done clumsily, it reads as mockery. Language matters more than most people think. Use their words back to them. If they describe a problem as tedious, call it tedious in your response. That single echo tells the other person you are not imposing your vocabulary. You are using theirs. This is one reason paraphrasing is a powerful rapport tool. It normalizes the speaker's experience and lowers the instinct to defend or exaggerate. Paraphrase with care. Don't parrot, translate. Say, it sounds like the main issue for you is X, is that right? That invites correction and refines understanding. Labels work like a pressure release valve. Labeling is a practice of naming emotions you detect. It seems like you're frustrated about the timeline, or you sound excited about the prospect. Naming an emotion gives a boundary and reduces its intensity. People often feel better simply because a feeling has been acknowledged. Labels also create a subtle alliance. You and the other person are now co-investigators of the same feeling rather than opponents. Use labels sparingly and honestly. False labels, guessing wildly about what someone feels, break trust faster than not labeling at all. Vulnerability, used wisely, builds rapport quickly. A short admission, I don't have all the answers on this, or I worried this might be an imposition, humanizes you and invites reciprocity. But vulnerability is not a blank check for oversharing. It should be measured and purposeful. Reveal a small, relevant uncertainty that signals honesty and keeps the other person comfortable revealing theirs. That kind of calibrated vulnerability turns stiff conversations into collaborative problem solving. Small favors and calibrated concessions are rapport accelerants. When you give something small and useful without immediately asking for something in return, a helpful connection, a quick data point, or a 10-minute follow-up call, you create a psychological ledger of goodwill. People feel compelled to even the ledger, often in ways that align with your goals. The key word is calibrated. Make the favor meaningful but inexpensive. An expensive concession too early signals desperation. A trivial favor is ignored. Think of favors as testable investments in the relationship. Timing is a muscle you can develop. People are rarely at their best at the same time you are. A request made at the end of a hectic day, in the middle of an unexpected crisis, or during a personal emergency will be judged harshly no matter how well you phrase it. Watch for windows of receptivity, moments when the other person has the bandwidth to consider change. These windows are different for everyone. Some prefer mornings, others unwind into deeper thinking late at night. If you can schedule a conversation when your counterpart is likely to be receptive, you've already improved your odds substantially. Pay attention to identity. People defend not only interests, but who they believe themselves to be. If you propose a solution that threatens someone's identity, a manager who prides themselves on frugality being asked to approve a lavish expense, for instance, they will resist even if the numbers make sense. Frame proposals in ways that affirm identity. For example, ask a frugal manager to see how a modest investment can prevent larger, future costs. When people see a decision as consistent with who they are, they switch from resisting to endorsing. Use social proof wisely. Humans look to others when forming judgments. If you can show that peers or respected figures chose a similar path, you reduce perceived risk. A single sentence, several departments have adopted this and reported smoother workflows, shifts the conversation because people hate being outliers when a safe alternative exists. But social proof must be relevant and credible. Citing nebulous groups or anonymous others rings hollow. Keep an eye on power dynamics. Rapport is easier when power feels balanced. If you are in a position of authority, use it to reduce the other person's risk, not to enforce submission. If you are the junior party, create influence by being reliably competent, by asking smart questions, and by offering options rather than ultimatums. When power is used to protect the other party's interests, you paradoxically gain more cooperation than when you wield it aggressively. Finally, test and iterate. Rapport is not magic. It's practice. After a meeting, reflect. What phrases made the other person relax? When did they lean in? What questions shut them down? Over time, you'll build an instinct for the cues that mean open versus closed. The best negotiators have a low capture mindset. They are ready to adapt and to try small behavioral experiments. Rapport is the soil in which good deals grow. Tender it, and your conversations will yield better outcomes with less friction. Chapter 4. If words are tools, questions are the ones that open locks. The single most underused skill in deal-making is the art of asking the right question at the right time. People nervously offer positions, argue numbers, or give ultimatums. The skillful negotiator asks questions that reveal motives, create options, and move conversation from static positions to dynamic problem solving. Good questions do three things. They gather information you couldn't otherwise get, they shape the frame of discussion, and they invite the other person to co-create the solution. In short, questions turn monologues into collaboration. Start by distinguishing between three broad types of questions: informational, diagnostic, and catalytic. Informational questions are straightforward fact finders. What is your deadline? Who needs to sign off? They are necessary but shallow. Diagnostic questions probe deeper. What would make this proposal worth approving? What keeps you awake about this project? These reveal underlying constraints and values. Catalytic questions are the most powerful because they change the way people think about the problem. If we could solve X without increasing costs, would you consider a longer-term partnership? Catalytic questions invite imagination, not just answers. The tone of the question matters as much as the content. Open questions: how, what, why, invite conversation. Closed questions: yes/no, force decisions but can also shut down nuance. Use open questions early to map territory and close questions later to confirm commitments. A single pattern I use often is: ask an open question to explore, follow with a paraphrase to validate, then close with narrow, action-oriented question. That pattern, explore, validate, commit, keeps the conversation moving without pressure. Calibrated questions are a special breed worth mastering. These are deliberately framed to make the other person think and to reveal their constraints without threatening their autonomy. Phrases like, how would you like us to proceed? What's the biggest obstacle you see here? Or how can we make this work for both of us? Do something subtle. They shift responsibility onto the other side to propose a solution, which you can then refine. Calibrated questions reduce defensiveness because they imply you're willing to listen and adapt. They also reveal power. If the other party struggles to answer, they likely don't have a coherent fallback. Beware of leading questions disguised as curiosity. Don't you agree this is fair? Feels like conversation, but is actually a shove. Leading questions can produce short-term compliance but breed resentment. Instead, prefer questions that earn insight without cornering the respondent. For example, replace "wouldn't you prefer a faster timeline" with "what timeline would make you comfortable?" The first attempts to manipulate. The second invites partnership. Hypotheticals are a clever way to test boundaries safely. If we could deliver X by June, would your team accept Y? Allows both sides to explore an outcome without immediate commitment. Hypotheticals are especially useful when one side fears losing face. They permit trial balloons. Use them to surface hidden objections and to observe emotional reactions. Sometimes the way someone answers a hypothetical, quick and decisive versus hesitant and evasive, reveals far more than the words. Silence after a question is a weapon people avoid because it feels awkward. Resist the urge to fill every pause. When you ask a meaningful question and then stay quiet, the other person will often take the lead to fill the silence with honesty, concessions, or clarifying details. A rule of thumb: after a complex or personal question, wait at least 3 seconds before speaking. That gives the other person space to think and signals you are genuinely listening. Questions can also be used to reframe loss and risk. People fear loss more than they value gain, and they often fixate on immediate downsides. A reframing question gently shifts attention. If we don't move on this, what will it cost me next quarter? Or what would happen if we delayed a decision for 6 months? Such questions force the counterpart to imagine the downside of inaction rather than only the upside of their current position. Often, resistance evaporates when the cost of stasis becomes visible. Strategic sequencing of questions is an underrated tactic. Start broad to build context, then narrow to specifics only once you understand the landscape. Early on, ask about priorities, pressures, and metrics for success. Midway, ask about constraints and potential trade-offs. Near the end, use commitment questions that require a small step. Can we agree to pilot this with one team? Or would you be comfortable sharing the draft by Friday? Small asks lower the psychological barrier to larger commitments later. There's ethical power in asking for permission before pushing. Would it be okay if I asked a blunt question? That tiny courtesy primes honesty because it reassures the other person you won't ambush them. People often respond with relief and candidness. Similarly, when you approach sensitive topics, budget cuts, performance issues, or personal circumstances, prefacing with a soft opener reduces defensiveness. I want to understand the budget constraints if you're willing to share. Use questions to structure trade-offs. Instead of starting with price and getting stuck, ask, what would you need from us to justify a higher price? Or, if we reduce scope, how would you adjust payment terms? These questions convert stubborn numbers into negotiable variables. They expose the real currency in the deal, timing, scope guarantees, reputational benefits, and let you craft packages rather than haggling on a single line item. Finally, keep a mental library of tactical scripts. When a client dodges a direct question, try, help me understand what's behind that. When someone says no quickly, follow with, what would need to change, or a yes? When conversations stall, try, if we can't reach agreement today, what would be the next best step? These short scripts are not manipulative. They are practical ways to reopen channels and keep options alive. The best negotiators are not those who win arguments, but those who ask questions that turn arguments into solutions. Questions give you access to the other person's map of the world, their constraints, their fears, their identity. With that map, you can design offers that feel fair, feasible, and align with who they want to be. Practice asking slower, listening harder, and then asking a follow-up that drills a little deeper. Over time, you'll find that conversations become less about defending positions and more about discovering shared paths forward. Chapter 5. Making an offer is where plans meet reality. It's the moment your preparation, rapport, and questions converge into something concrete. Yet many people treat offers like an afterthought. A number, a concession, a guest thrown into the room. That mistake turns negotiation into price fighting instead of value creation. In this chapter, we'll treat offers as strategic tools, crafted packages that communicate intent, protect your interests, and invite collaborative movement. You'll learn how to anchor, how to bundle, how to make conditional offers, and how to present proposals that feel less like a demand and more like a solution. First, recognize that every offer is two things at once: a proposition and a signal. The proposition is the content, price, scope, timeline, terms. The signal is what the offer tells the other person about your priorities, flexibility, and seriousness. A low, hasty offer signals desperation or ignorance. A thoughtful, transparent offer signals competence and invites reciprocal clarity. Before you ever speak a number or a deadline, decide what signal you want to send. Is this opening salvo meant to anchor a wide negotiation range? Is it a final best offer meant to close quickly? Is it a probe to test the other party's flexibility? Your intention will shape the wording, the timing, and the supplementary evidence you bring. Anchoring is the single most powerful cognitive lever in offer making. People often take the first number they hear as a reference point, then adjust from there. That's why your initial anchor matters. If you need $100,000, presenting $95,000 anchors lower. Presenting $120,000 anchors higher. But anchoring is not merely about picking the highest possible number. It's about choosing an anchor that you can justify and defend. An unsupported, outrageous anchor will be dismissed or offend. The most useful anchors are large enough to give you room to move and tight enough that they can be explained with credible rationale, market data, precedent, or a clear breakdown of value delivered. Bundling moves a conversation away from a single line item and into a package of trade-offs. If you compete only on price, you lose bargaining power. If you bundle features, services, timing, and guarantees, you give the other party multiple ways to say yes while protecting your bottom line. For example, instead of reducing your hourly rate, offer a bundle, a slightly higher hourly rate, but a guarantee of fewer revisions and a faster delivery timeline. Or pair a discount with a longer commitment. Bundles create perceived value and allow for creative reciprocity. You give on something inexpensive to you but valuable to them, and they give on something expensive to them but easy for you to provide. Present offers as choices, not ultimatums. People hate feeling trapped. Offering 2 or 3 distinct paths, a conservative plan, an accelerated plan, and a premium plan, gives people autonomy while guiding them toward the option you prefer. Each option should highlight trade-offs clearly: cost versus speed, risk versus reward, scope versus flexibility. This structure frames a decision as wise selection rather than surrender under pressure. Use phrasing like, you can choose A if your priority is speed, B if you prefer lower cost, or C if you want long-term support. Which one fits your needs? That invites participation and makes the decision psychologically safer. Make offers conditional. Conditional offers preserve reciprocity and prevent you from giving away value for free. A simple pattern is, I can do X if you agree to Y. The condition can be a timeline, a minimum order quantity, a public reference, or a modest concession. Conditions protect you and train the other party that deals require exchange. Be prepared for counter conditions and know which ones you can accept. The goal is a balanced exchange, not clever manipulation. When both sides are explicit about conditions, friction lessens because expectations are clearer. Frame value by translating features into outcomes. Most people don't buy features. They buy what those features make possible. Instead of listing tasks you will perform, describe the future state you will create. Fewer support tickets, faster hiring cycles, higher conversion, lower stress. Use numbers where credible, but be honest. A range backed by case studies is better than a precise but fabricated metric. Stories help here. A one-paragraph example of a client who achieved X after adopting your solution makes your offer real. People imagine themselves into that story and are likely to sign on. Timing matters when you present offers. A well-timed proposal during a receptive window can close faster and at better terms than the same proposal delivered at a bad moment. If you sense hesitancy, don't blurt out your best offer immediately. Instead, plan a conditional anchor. If you decide by Friday we can include an additional training session, that creates urgency that is framed as a benefit rather than a pressure tactic. Conversely, avoid forcing decisions at emotionally loaded times. If someone is distracted or rushed, suggest a short follow-up to give them space. Timing is about respect as much as leverage. Use transparency strategically. When you can explain why your price or terms look the way they do, cost structure, scope of work, industry standards, you reduce suspicion. A short, honest breakdown prevents the mental leap from too expensive to price gouging. That said, transparency has limits. Don't reveal strategic weaknesses, like your bottom line costs, that undermine bargaining power. Instead, disclose what helps the other person understand the value, benchmarks, deliverables, and relevant constraints. Watch the language you use. How you phrase and offer affects perception. Avoid absolute-sounding formulas that reduce flexibility unless you mean them. Instead of, I'll do this for $X, try, based on the scope we discussed, a fair investment would be $X. I can adjust this if we tighten scope or extend the timeline. That wording signals confidence and openness at once. Use language to build partnership. We can structure this so it meets your goals while keeping risk low. Small linguistic shifts from demand to collaboration change the conversation tone significantly. Prepare the paperwork before you need it. A clear, concise summary of your offer sent immediately after the conversation reduces misinterpretation and speeds decisions. Include the options discussed, timelines, next steps, and a date by which the offer is valid if timing matters. A crisp written offer is a psychological anchor that sets the tempo for the rest of the exchange. It also helps you maintain consistency and prevents the creep of informal, unfavorable terms later. Finally, plan how you'll handle a rejection of your offer. A no is data. Ask what would need to change for a yes, and whether there's a smaller pilot or a different partner arrangement that could work. Rejection might prompt pivoting to a different bundle, offering a time-limited trial, or agreeing to revisit with new information. Resilience matters. You don't have to win every pitch. The goal is to convert as many conversations as possible into useful outcomes, signed agreements, qualified feedback, or future opportunities. An offer is not simply a position. It's a crafted invitation to collaborate, When you anchor with reason, bundle for flexibility, present choices, use conditional language, and frame value and outcomes the other person cares about, you turn a single number into a set of options that make saying yes easier. Practice the art of the offer until it feels like designing solutions instead of making demands. That's the difference between temporary wins and lasting influence. Chapter 6. Resistance is not a personal failure. It's information. When someone pushes back, interrupts, or says no, they're offering you a signal, a location on the map where the deal is stuck. The common mistake is to hear resistance as rejection and react defensively. Louder arguments, faster concessions, or retreat. The smarter move is to treat resistance as raw material. It tells you what matters, where fears live, and which levers you still haven't found. This chapter shows how to welcome objections, use them to refine offers, and turn no into not yet or better yes. First, change your internal script. Most people think objection equals obstacle. Experienced negotiators think objection equals starting point. When you expect resistance, you show up calmer and more curious. That calmness alone shifts the emotional temperature of the room. The opposite, surprise or irritation, telegraphs weakness and escalates defensiveness. So mentally reframe every pushback as an invitation. Tell me more. That tiny reframe turns a fight into a conversation. Listen like your future depends on it. When an objection arrives, your first task is not to counter, but to understand. Use a 3-step sequence. Acknowledge, mirror, and ask. Acknowledge the feeling behind the words. I hear that price is a real concern. Mirror their words. Repeat the core objection in their terms. Then ask a clarifying question. What specifically would make this investment feel worth it to you? This sequence does 2 things. It validates emotion and buys you time to gather your thoughts. People deflate when they feel heard. From that deflation come more useful details. Don't fall for the impulse to over-explain. Long defenses sound anxious and often introduce new points of resistance you hadn't considered. Short, composed responses are more persuasive. If the objection is factual, your timeline is too long. Answer with succinct fact and an outcome. I understand. The timeline is 6 weeks because we include 2 rounds of testing. That reduces rework and usually saves 3 weeks later. If the objection is emotional, I don't trust you deliver before, offer a credibility anchor, a brief client example, a reference, or performance guarantee. Keep the response tight and offer to follow up with supporting evidence. Use a feel, felt, found pattern when appropriate, but avoid making it sound canned. A genuine version might be, I understand how you feel. Other clients felt that way at first, and what they found after a pilot was X. This pattern normalizes doubt and translates it into a predictable path forward. It's especially effective when you can follow the concrete, verifiable outcome. Reframe objections by changing the reference point. People often fixate on a single downside because it's easy to picture. Your job is to make other, more relevant facts just as tangible. If someone says that's expensive, reframe. I hear that. Let's compare the cost of what you'll spend fixing the same problem if it stays broken for 6 months. Or ask a question that reframes the frame. When you say expensive, do you mean it's outside the current budget or that it doesn't feel like the right value? That question reveals whether the issue is financial, timing, identity, or perceived value. Break big objections into small problems. Many no's hide a handful of smaller concerns. Timing, risk, authority, scope. Address them one at a time. Ask, if we could solve the budget concern, would the timeline still be a problem? This technique converts an amorphous refusal into a checklist of solvable items. Suddenly, you're not negotiating against a monolith. You're clearing individual hurdles. Offer testable, low-risk options. When resistance is high, propose a limited pilot, a phased rollout, or a performance-based clause. People resist less when their downside is bounded. A pilot says, try it, see the results, and decide with fresh data. It's often easier to secure a small commitment for proof than to win a full-scale, high-stakes approval immediately. Use conditional concessions to preserve reciprocity. When you do concede, make it explicit. I can lower the fee by 10% if you commit to a 12-month agreement. Or, I can include that extra report if we move the start date up. This keeps the exchange balanced and signals that concessions are not freebies. It also tests seriousness. Those who accept conditional concessions are often genuinely committed. Those who demand without offering anything in return are less reliable partners. Watch for identity-based objections. People sometimes resist not because of money or logistics, but because a decision threatens who they see themselves as frugal, independent, a decisive leader. When identity is at stake, flattening the argument into logic alone won't work. You must craft language that preserves identity. This approach would let you be the leader who saves the team time while keeping costs in check, or choosing this option would let you maintain control over quality without losing flexibility. Help them perform their preferred identity while getting to the desired outcome. Silence is your ally. After you reply to an objection, pause. People often fill silence by softening their stance, offering new information, or making concessions. Resist the urge to talk just to cover the quiet. Let the other party process. A 3 to 5 second silence after a reply is perceptible but not uncomfortable. It often produces clarity. When you face stubborn, repeated objections, switch the frame to process. Ask, what would need to happen for us to move forward? Or, who else would need to say yes? These process questions shift the battle from content to pathway. They reveal gatekeepers and next steps and convert a stuck discussion into an actionable plan. Know when to walk away. Not every objection is solvable, and not every no should be turned into yes. Your BATNA exists for a reason. If the cost of the deal, financial, reputational, or emotional, exceeds your minimum acceptable outcome, walking away protects long-term value. Walking away is not failure. It's a strategic choice that preserves leverage and integrity. Do so politely. Thank them for their time, leave the door open, and outline conditions under which you'd reconsider. That professional exit keeps relationships intact. Finally, practice debriefs. After a hard conversation, reflect on what triggered resistance and how your responses worked. Note phrases that calmed, evidence that persuaded, and moments when you felt reactive. Over time, you'll assemble a personalized toolkit. The questions that reveal root objections, the one-line credibility anchors that land reliably, and the concession structures that protect value. The best negotiators treat objections as experiments. Test, observe, learn, repeat. Resistance is not a wall. It's the beginning of the path. If you can listen, reframe, decompose, and offer low-risk ways forward, most objections will evolve into workable solutions. Even the final no becomes useful data, telling you which directions to improve, which offers to redesign, and which relationships are worth cultivating another day. Chapter 7. Closing is less about a single moment of triumph and more about the careful orchestration of small moves that convert willingness into action. Many people imagine a closing line, a flourish that forces a yes, and chase it like a magic key. Real closing is quieter. It's reducing friction, aligning procedures, and removing excuses. It's the difference between an agreement that feels good in conversation and an agreement that actually gets signed, paid, and implemented. This chapter walks through the psychology and mechanics of closing, so you leave with signed papers, delivered work, and preserved relationships. First, understand that commitment is both psychological and procedural. Psychologically, a person says yes when the perceived benefits outweigh the perceived costs and risks. Procedurally, a yes becomes real only when necessary next steps, approvals, paperwork, payments, scheduling, are completed. Your job is to support both tracks. You make the emotional pathways smooth by summarizing benefits, answering last-minute fears, and affirming identity. You make the procedural pathways smooth by clarifying steps, assigning responsibilities, and agreeing on timelines. Start the close by summarizing the decision in simple language. People hate ambiguity. After a good conversation, say exactly what you believe has been agreed. To recap, you'll sign a 6-month contract for X. We'll start on the first business day after receipt, and we'll deliver the first milestone in 3 weeks. I'll send the contract by this afternoon. Does that match your understanding? This short recap does 3 things. It tests for alignment, eliminates misunderstandings, and creates a small commitment in the other person's mouth, which makes a later signature more likely. When someone verbally confirms a summary, they're much more likely to follow through, because speech creates a personal ledger. Make the next steps painfully easy. Remove friction wherever you can. If a signature is required, send a one-click e-signature link. If approval requires another person's sign-off, offer to draft a short memo they can forward. If payment is needed, provide multiple simple options and clarify invoicing terms. People delay when the next step looks like work. Your role at the close is to make the work yours or to hand them a tiny, effortless task. Use deadlines wisely. A deadline framed as a benefit. If we sign by Friday, we can include an extra kickoff training. Motivates action more than arbitrary pressure. Conversely, avoid creating false urgency. People smell coercion. Limit deadlines to real constraints. Pricing that expires, limited capacity, or a vendor timeline. When a deadline exists, make sure it's truthful and explain why it matters. When someone hesitates at the point of signing, address the hesitation directly but gently. Often it's fear of regret. Calibrate your response to be empathetic and practical. I understand, want to be sure. Would it help if we set a 30-day review with a satisfaction clause? Or would a phased payment help manage risk? Offer a limited safety net that reduces perceived downside without destroying your economics. Options like a short piloting period, performance milestones, or an early exit condition. With clear terms, convert stuck maybe into a trial that can prove value. Get commitments incrementally. If a full signature feels too big, ask for a smaller, non-threatening commitment that still moves things forward. A deposit, a pilot order, a meeting to draft a final document, or a date for final approval. These micro-commitments build momentum. People who make small, public commitments are psychologically primed to follow through on larger ones later. It's called commitment consistency. Use it ethically. Only request steps you will deliver on swiftly. Document everything succinctly and immediately. After any agreement, send a clear, concise summary email within 24 hours. The agreed package timelines, deliverables, costs, payment terms, and next steps with owners and dates. That email becomes a record and the shared reference point. It reduces scope creep, prevents "I thought you meant X," and lets everyone recheck without rehashing the whole conversation. When you write the summary, lead with the action. Next step, I will send the contract by 4 p.m. today. Action required. Please sign by Friday to secure the launch date. Use rituals to bind commitment. Humans love ceremonies. Short rituals create psychological closure and mark the transition from talking to doing. A simple ritual could be a handshake and a sentence. We're agreed. I'll get started Monday. A one-line sign statement in an email, or a brief kickoff call where roles and timelines are publicly named. Rituals don't need to be dramatic. They just make decisions feel real. Anticipate operational handoffs. Deals fail in the gray area between signing and delivery. Think ahead. Who will run the project? Who will receive invoices? What information does the implementation team need? And what are the acceptance criteria? Before you close, state how the handoff will work and what you need from the client to start. When the receiving party sees a smooth plan, their confidence grows and the chance of friction later shrinks. Guard against scope creep with clear acceptance criteria. Define what done looks like, measurable outputs, delivery dates, and a sign-off process. When parties disagree later, refer back to the acceptance criteria rather than subjective impressions. If you anticipate likely changes, include a change order process that outlines how additional work will be priced and scheduled. This preserves relationships because changes are treated as neutral administrative steps rather than heated bargaining moments. Follow up with discipline. A signed contract is not the endpoint. Execution begins immediately. After the signature, send the kickoff agenda, schedule the first check-in, and deliver an early win if possible. Early delivery of something tangible, a project plan, a quick analysis, a prototype, reassures the other party that their choice was sound. Momentum feeds itself. Early progress makes future cooperation easier. Handle post-close bumps with grace. If things go wrong, a delayed payment, a missed milestone, address it quickly and factually. Don't let small operational problems fester into partnership-damaging disputes. Use the same tools you use during negotiation. Listen, identify the real constraint, propose a conditional fix, and document the repair. People respect partners who own problems and solve them calmly. Finally, preserve the relationship beyond the transaction. Closing the deal is a doorway to future opportunities. Treat customers, partners, and colleagues as ongoing relationships, not one-off wins. Periodic check-ins, small value-added gestures, and openness to feedback keep the connection warm. Reputation compounds. A client who trusts you will refer others, give bigger projects, and act as a buffer in tough times. Here are a few short scripts you can use at closing. To make sure we're aligned, here's my summary. Could you confirm it? If we sign today, I can guarantee the kickoff date of X. Does that work for you? I understand the hesitation. Will a 30-day pilot with a review clause help? I'll send the contract now. Can you sign by Friday to lock in the price? Closing is not about tricks. It's about removing obstacles and making the path to action feel sensible, safe, and straightforward. When you summarize clearly, reduce friction, offer small safety nets, document promptly, and manage handoffs like a project manager, you turn a fragile handshake into durable results. The real power of closing is that it turns intent into impact, and that's where real deals live. Chapter 8. A signed agreement is not the finish line. It's the starting gate. Real skill in deals shows itself over time, in how you keep promises, handle surprises, and turn one successful transaction into a durable relationship that yields repeat opportunities, referrals, and goodwill. This chapter is about the long game. How to maintain agreements, manage performance expectations, renegotiate when circumstances change, and protect the reputation that will win you future deals. Start with the simplest truth. Consistency builds trust faster than eloquence. People forgive a missed deadline more readily when you've been reliable in other ways. Clear communication, small early wins, and predictable follow-through. That means your behavior after closing matters as much as your behavior before it. Show up on the dates you promised. Deliver what you promised in the format you promised. And when a problem appears, tell people before they discover it. Transparency is not weakness. It's a repair tool. A single honest message about delay plus a plan for fix usually nets more trust than a silent hope everything will work out. Define success together. Too many deals fail because the parties assume done means the same thing. From day one, co-create measurable acceptance criteria. What will be delivered, by when, how it will be evaluated, and who signs off. When outcomes are observable and agreed, disputes shrink and decisions speed up. If the work is subjective, design, strategy, leadership, translate it into behavioral outcomes or milestones rather than vague adjectives. For example, reduce support tickets by 30% in 90 days is clearer than improve support. If you can't create numeric metrics, at least define observable behaviors and a review cadence. Establish a rhythm of communication that fits the relationship. Too much reporting wastes time. Too little creates anxiety. Agree on a cadence. Weekly check-ins for early phases. Monthly strategic reviews for steady state. And a single escalation path for urgent issues. Use short, focused updates. What was done, what's next, and any blockers. When you stick to a predictable rhythm, your partner relaxes. Predictability reduces perceived risk, and lower perceived risk increases willingness to expand the relationship. Handle change with a clear process. Change will happen. Budgets shift, people move, markets swing. Renegotiation is not a moral failing. It's a natural adaptation. What matters is how you frame it. Start with a conversation that acknowledges a change, restates the shared goals, and proposes concrete, conditional options. For example, given the new timeline, here are 3 ways we can adapt. Extend the deadline with adjusted scope. Keep scope and add resources at X cost, or pause and revisit in 6 weeks. Presenting options preserves agency and signals readiness to collaborate rather than demand. Always document any change and its implications for cost, timing, and deliverables. Use performance reviews to build goodwill rather than to accuse. Periodic reviews should focus on learning. What worked, what didn't, and how to improve. If the project underperformed, lead with what you learned and what you will change. Offer a remedial plan before the client asks. This proactive stance converts potential disappointment into an investment in the relationship. Clients and partners respect vendors who act like owners instead of contractors. Guard your reputation actively. Reputation is cumulative and public in ways it wasn't a decade ago. Small acts of unprofessionalism, misreplies, sloppy deliverables, or hidden fees travel faster than a good testimonial. Invest in prosaic habits that protect reputation. Tidy documentation. Prompt invoicing with clear terms, respectful escalation when issues arise, and a policy for refunds or credits when performance genuinely fails. When you do make a mistake, apologize quickly, explain the fix, and follow up. People remember how you handled the failure more vividly than the failure itself. When expanding relationships, sell outcomes, not features. If you've done a good job on a pilot or a small engagement and want to grow, present a focused proposal that shows incremental value and clear risk controls. Avoid offering more as a vague promise. Show measurable next steps. What additional benefit the client will get, how it will be measured, and how you'll limit downside through trials, caps, or phase payments. Growth proposals that reduce anxiety scale better than grandiose visions that lack guardrails. Protect boundaries and avoid dependency traps. The most valuable clients sometimes become the most demanding. If one partner consumes disproportionate time for little incremental revenue, it erodes your capacity for better opportunities. Set clear boundaries about scope, response times, and out-of-scope work. Use an explicit change order process and charge appropriately for emergency or off-schedule requests. Boundaries are not rude. They preserve the quality of service and your ability to serve others well. Be intentional about handoffs. Many partnerships stumble when work moves from sales to delivery or delivery to operations. Create a formal handoff checklist, background context, decisions made, technical constraints, contact lists, and acceptance criteria. A short kickoff meeting with all stakeholders present aligns expectations and prevents rework born of miscommunication. Handoffs are an investment in reducing friction and conserving goodwill. Collect and use feedback wisely. A simple post-milestone survey or a short feedback call provides early warning signs and opportunities for improvement. Ask specific questions about clarity, timeliness, and impact rather than global satisfaction. Use feedback to iterate on process, not as a battleground for blame. When you implement change based on feedback, tell the partner, they'll feel heard and see tangible results. When disputes escalate, favor mediation over public conflict. If negotiations sour, propose a neutral third party or a structured review to surface facts and options. Mediation is faster and cheaper than litigation or reputational warfare, and it preserves relationships more often than it severs them, even when you believe you're right. Consider whether the long-term cost of a drawn-out fight exceeds the value of a negotiated compromise. Keep records, contracts, emails clarifying scope, invoices, acceptance notes. Keep them organized and accessible. Records are not cold bureaucracy. They're the memory of the relationship. They allow you to resolve disputes objectively and move quickly when someone asks what was agreed. Good record keeping also lets you spot patterns. Recurring delays, common scope creep, or repeated success levers you can codify and sell again. Finally, invest in small rituals that humanize the relationship. A brief thank you note after a successful delivery, a quarterly lunch to review strategy, or a small context-appropriate gift after a major milestone keeps the human connection alive. Deals made with people succeed or fail based on trust, and trust is nourished by small, consistent acts of care. Sustaining agreements is the compound interest phase of deal-making. The habits you build after signature, clarity in definition, discipline in delivery, empathy in communication, and courage in renegotiation determine whether a single transaction becomes a decade-long partnership or a one-time, forgettable exchange. Treat the post-deal period as a new negotiation, one that, when managed well, yields the most valuable currency of all, reliable, repeatable trust. Chapter 9. Power and persuasion live on a knife edge. Use well, they help people solve real problems. Use poorly, they leave a trail of regret, burn bridges, and a reputation that repels opportunity. This chapter is less about tactics and more about the responsibility that comes with the ability to influence outcomes. If you want deals that last and relationships that multiply, you must treat influence as a stewardship, a capability that requires ethical guardrails, humility, and a willingness to repair harm when things go wrong. Let's start with a simple truth. Intent matters. Two negotiators might use the same phrase, an emotional label, a calibrated question, a well-timed silence, but their intent changes the moral contour of the act. If your intent is to help both parties reach a better place, to create value and protect dignity, your influence is persuasion. If your intent is to exploit someone's fear, ignorance, or limited options for one-sided gain, it's manipulation. That distinction isn't academic. People sense it over time. Manipulative wins are often short-lived. Persuasive wins compound into referrals, repeat business, and a reputation that opens doors. Because intent can be slippery, use practical pre-commitments. Before you deploy a technique that nudges decisions, run it through 3 quick tests. The benefit test: does the other party gain real, meaningful value, not just cosmetic wins? The disclosure test: would you be comfortable if your approach were described publicly? And the reversibility test: could you undo the decision if you later found critical information missing? If the answer to any is no, pause. These tests aren't bureaucratic. They're survival tools. They save you from choices that feel clever in the moment but corrosive later. Transparency is not a binary. You don't have a hand over proprietary strategy or cost breakdowns that undermine legitimate bargaining positions. But you do owe truth about the parts of the deal that affect the other party's interests: risks, limitations, conflict of interest, and plausible alternatives. When you disclose the meaningful friction points, you reduce the chance of nasty surprises later. People forgive complexity when it's explained honestly. They rarely forgive deception masked as simplicity. Respect autonomy. The most ethical negotiators create space for genuine choice. That means avoiding high-pressure tactics that rely on manufactured scarcity, relentless time-limited offers that aren't real, or emotional manipulation that preys on vulnerability. Instead, design offers that highlight trade-offs and make consequences visible. Use defaults to steer, not to trap. For example, offer a limited time discount because your capacity is genuinely constrained, not because you invented scarcity to force a decision. If you do use deadlines, be ready to explain the constraint plainly. Power imbalances deserve special care. When one side has much more information, leverage, or urgency, ethical responsibility increases. Lawyers negotiating with lay clients, executives dealing with junior staff, or sellers facing desperate buyers should all raise a higher standard of candor. Ask yourself, am I using my advantage to protect vulnerable people or to push them into unfair exchange? Often the long-term benefits of fairness, loyalty, reduced churn, better outcomes, outweigh the short-term gains of aggressive exploitation. Reputation is your social capital. Protect it fiercely. Reputation accumulates in small moments. How quickly you respond, how you handle a late complaint, whether you correct an honest mistake. Consider modest, automatic rituals that protect reputation. Always acknowledging a missed promise immediately. Issuing a small credit when service legitimately falls short, or following up after a primary milestone with a clear rundown of next steps and risks. These acts are cheap relative to the cost of losing trust, but their compound effect is enormous. There are ethical gray zones to navigate. Persuasion often relies on subtle influences, framing, anchoring, descriptive norms that shift choices without overt coercion. Skilled practitioners use these levers to make better options easier, not to hide costs. A rule of thumb: if the nudge benefits both parties and makes the decision simpler without hiding downside, it's acceptable. If the nudge primarily benefits you while obscuring material downside, rethink it. When in doubt, default to clarity. Mistakes will happen. Deals will fail. Feelings will be hurt. And sometimes you'll discover you've unintentionally pressured someone. Repair matters more than perfection. Own errors quickly, apologize plainly, and propose concrete remedies. A good repair is specific. I missed a delivery date, and that caused your launch to shift. Here's how I'll make it right. An expedited patch by Tuesday, a partial refund, and weekly check-ins until stable. And it shifts energy from blame to action. Rarely does an honest, generous repair harm your reputation. More often, it deepens it. Practice moral humility. Ethics are cultural and situational. A tactic acceptable in one industry may be abusive in another. Listen to dissenting voices and to the people you serve. If feedback suggests your approach causes harm, treat it as a data point, not a threat. Adjusting your methods in response to real-world effect is not weakness. It's the mark of a professional who values legacy over short-term gains. Scale your influence responsibly. As you gain power, larger teams, higher titles, a broader client base, the consequences of your methods expand. Train your teams not only in tactics, but in the ethical principles behind them. Create simple rules for negotiators. Protect vulnerable parties. Require disclosure of conflict of interest, and mandate review for unusually aggressive deadlines or pricing structures. Institutional guardrails prevent individual lapses from becoming systemic problems. Finally, remember the slow math of trust. Shortcuts can create the illusion of success, but real influence compounds slowly. Choose approaches that make people feel respected, informed, and capable. Those are boring-sounding virtues, but they are the ones that make deals sustainable. Influence used as stewardship, protecting value, honoring autonomy, repairing mistakes, becomes a generator of future opportunity. Influence used as exploitation becomes a tax that the market and people will avoid. If you adopt one habit from this chapter, let it be this. Before you use persuasive technique, ask whether the other person would be better off and whether they would feel treated fairly when they look back on the decision. If the honest answer is yes, proceed. If not, redesign the approach. Influence that survives hindsight is influence worth wielding. Chapter 10. By now you have a toolkit. Preparation that steadies you, rapport that opens doors, questions that map motives, offers that invite choice, objection handling that converts resistance into information, closing rituals that turn intent into action, and post-deal practices that compound trust. Those are the skills you build and the habits you practice. But if the whole book has a single practical idea you can carry into every conversation, here it is. Simple, repeated by many teachers in different words, and powerful because it changes your orientation more than your technique. Called the alignment first principle. Begin every negotiation by seeking alignment with the other person's problems, identity, and constraints before you ask for anything. Alignment is not flattery. It is a deliberate act of understanding what matters to the other side and then designing offers that help them get it while advancing your goals too. When you align first, resistance falls because you've already shown you're solving their problem, not just chasing your own. Alignment turns bargaining into collaboration and transactions into relationships. Alignment starts with curiosity and ends with clarity. The curiosity looks like the diagnostic and catalytic questions from Chapter 4. What would make this decision worth it for you? Who else must agree? What would happen if we did nothing? Those questions are not rhetorical. They're the data gathering engine that reveals the levers you can use. The clarity you produce is the crisp description of shared outcomes and the small procedural steps that make getting there easy. In practice, alignment means you can answer 3 questions the other party cares about before they have to ask them. What do you want to accomplish? How will success be measured? What will make this low risk for me? When you apply alignment first, your proposal looks different. Instead of a single price or a single demand, you offer packages that map to the other person's pain points and identity. You anchor with evidence the way we discussed in Chapter 5, but you anchor the outcomes they value. You present choices that respect their autonomy. You make concessions conditional and visible. In short, your offers feel like solutions, not ambushes. The practical path to alignment can be reduced to a short sequence you can practice before every meeting. First, prepare with empathy. Before you enter the room, write down, honestly and briefly, what you believe the other party's top 3 pressures are, who influences them, and what identity they perform in their role. This is not guesswork if you've done your homework. Even a disciplined set of informed assumptions beats winging it. Preparing empathy sharpens your listening because you know what to listen for. Second, listen to confirm, not to rebut. Use short, clarifying questions and paraphrase their answers back in their language. When a counterpart says, "Our board is nervous about long-term commitments," you paraphrase, "It sounds like the board values flexibility over long contracts. Is that right?" That small move does 2 things. It demonstrates understanding and converts vague worry into a concrete constraint you can design around. Third, translate constraints into tradable variables. If the board fears long commitments, trade contract length for other guarantees, phase delivery, performance milestones, or an early exit clause with notice. If a manager fears budget optics, trade payment timing, or marketing visibility for a slightly higher fee. The key is to get what costs you little but reduces their perceived risk. You create value by shifting the currency of the conversation to things the other side prizes. Fourth, make proposals that preserve dignity and identity. Frame options so that the other person can say yes without feeling they betrayed their self-image. If a leader is proud of frugality, let them protect that identity with language that calls your plan a lean pilot or a cost-conserving proof. People are far more likely to accept an outcome that affirms how they want to be seen. Fifth, secure small commitments and make follow-through easy. Once aligned, ask for a micro-yes, a pilot, a deposit, a date for sign-off. Then remove friction around that micro-yes. One-click signatures, ready-to-forward memos, and clear next steps. Momentum grows from small, rapid confirmations. Alignment first doesn't mean you surrender your needs. Instead, it gives you a more durable way to meet them. The principle flips the equation. Rather than forcing consent, you create conditions where consent is a natural next step. That's not manipulation. It's responsible design. It respects autonomy while acknowledging that people often need help seeing trade-offs clearly. There will be times when alignment is impossible. Sometimes interests are genuinely opposed, constraints are movable, or your BATNA is stronger than any compromise. Alignment first helps you identify those moments early so you can walk away with dignity or pivot to a different approach. Walking away is sometimes the most aligned decision you can make for your long-term goals. Mastery takes repetition. Practice alignment in low-stakes contexts. Choose a small negotiation this week, a vendor price, a household chore division, a meeting agenda, and deliberately apply the alignment sequence. Note the effect. Most people overestimate the power of rhetoric and underestimate the power of listening and design. Over time, the alignment habit will shorten negotiations, reduce emotional cost, and increase the quality of the agreements you reach. A few final, practical tips to cement this habit. Keep a short checklist, 3 lines. You can glance at before talks. 1. Their top pressure. 2. Their identity signal. 3. One low-cost concession you can trade. After each negotiation, do a 1-paragraph debrief. What did you learn about their constraints? What small move changed the tone? And what you'll do differently next time? Those micro debriefs are how practice becomes craft. Remember that deals are not scores. They are relationships in miniature. When you orient to alignment, you accept a slightly slower start for a much more sustainable outcome. You trade dramatic wins for repeatable wins. And in the long run, repeatable wins build careers, companies, and lives. Influence used to close a door that shuts you out later is hollow. Influence used to open a door that leads to more rooms is durable. This book gives you frameworks and scripts, but a real lesson is human. Deal making is about helping other humans solve problems while honoring who they are. Do that reliably, and you will rarely be left looking back at a signed paper and regretting what it cost you. You will be writing a different ledger, one of trust, reputation, and options. Go practice alignment. Start small. Keep a debrief log. Treat every conversation as an experiment. Over time, the skill will stop feeling strategic and start feeling like the simplest, most humane way to get what you want, by first helping someone else get what they need.